We ditched the 9 to 5 grind so that we would be able to have time to be home with our families. And now we teach other people how to do that too.
Hey, so they want us to talk about quiet quitting. Quiet quitting. What's quiet quitting? So quiet quitting is when you go to work, but you don't put any extra effort in, you don't go above and beyond, and you don't take on additional assignments. Isn't that just like doing your job? No, it is totally different. It's like you're just doing the bare minimum and you don't even care about getting promoted, so you don't do extra work during the nights or weekends. Okay, well, I've been quiet quitting for like 6 months, and it must have been really quiet because nobody seems to have noticed. Wait, am I quiet quitting?
It's interesting. I had never heard this concept until I think it was literally made up in the last 30 days because I've been seeing it now everywhere. I think basically, it's interesting because how he explained it was saying oh, you don't do anything extra or above and beyond. If you aren't being appreciated at your job, you're not being given raises, you aren't, being appreciated. They are constantly wanting you to focus on your weaknesses and always criticizing. I mean, what would incentivize somebody to want to do above and beyond if you aren't being recognized or compensated for it? And I think that is something that so many people are coming into today with corporate America and with jobs in general, because especially now, we see so many companies saying that they're short staffed. You've got people who are coming in and they're covering two positions and they're working like a dog and they're not being paid double for doing double the work. So I think this is something. I don't think that quiet quitting is new. I like how they've given a name to it, because definitely I think that there's a lot of people who are sitting in that realm right now where they know this is no longer for them and they want something different, which I think we're seeing a lot of those quiet quitters coming into our world. In fact, we just were speaking with somebody this week that came into our program who said she had already cleaned out her desk. She hasn't quit yet, but she's taken all her stuff home. She's already made that decision that she's got one foot out the door. And I think that a lot of people are there. So many people are putting in so much effort and they're not being compensated for it.
Bingo. They're not compensated for it. They're not appreciated for it. They're not people feel appreciated in different ways. My friend had a meeting with his boss, and his boss is typically, he's not overly praising. He's kind of hard to please. He has very high expectations, very high standards. And my friend has fought has really stood up to him and really come into his own through interactions with him. And at the end of their meeting recently, this boss stuck out his hand and shook my friend's hand. And I said, "What? That's not typical. To greet someone like you haven't seen them for a while. Okay, shake hands. Maybe I've just been out of corporate world too long, but this seemed abnormal." And my friend was super excited at this little teeny tiny thing that signified that his boss appreciates him and respects him and sees him more as a colleague than a subordinate. It's things like that people are missing. It's more work with less, more work with less, more work with less. And I think it's also people starting to see that there are other opportunities. You can take skills that you already have and build a business from it. You don't have to necessarily go get a whole huge education. Entrepreneurship is for everybody. If you have the tenacity, if you have the perseverance, if you have the support in the community, if you have the roadmap, even, you can be a successful entrepreneur and you can save yourself the headaches and the stress and the frustration and the striving, I think that comes with a corporate environment. And I think that's what our mission, Tara, is to open people's eyes to the fact that they are chained to a desk with golden handcuffs Why are you going to question and think about going out on your own when this job gives you benefits, when this job gives you health insurance and life insurance and dental insurance and all of these things that you don't have to worry about, except when you have to pick a plan every year and hope that you're going to be covered and all that good stuff? Why would you ever question if you could do something better or get something better when you have those golden handcuffs around your wrists?
Well, I think in the case of this with the quiet quitting, like I think the way that I view it is that I look at entrepreneurship as growth, right? Like we're always growing, we're always bettering ourselves. You jump into the personal development. If you're quiet quitting on your employer, that basically means that, I mean, yes, okay, you're not putting in any extra effort because you're not being compensated for it, but you're also then stifling yourself. You're stifling your creativity, your opportunity, your ability to grow because you have just basically put a dead stop on doing anything extra. So, okay, well, if you do that, sure, you're kind of sticking it to the man by not, going above and beyond. But at the same time, you're really kind of screwing yourself over in a way because you're just existing and you're not growing. I think for me, if I know I wasn't going to leave, I would just be like, okay, I'm here anyway. So like I'm going to take this opportunity and I'm going to go and learn maybe from a different colleague something so that I can move my way up that ladder, right? Like if you're not going to quit anyway, why not take that opportunity? But for those that are like, okay, I'm going to have one foot out the door, then it's like, okay, well, start looking for those opportunities to move and to grow, because the minute you stop growing, like I think that that's setting yourself up for a whole world of other problems, because we need to be growing as humans. And so if you're just going to be sitting at your desk with the golden handcuffs without any sort of growth in mind, I think you're just going to feel more and more and more resentful and more and more and more stifled as you're sitting there every single day showing up to work. And eventually you're going to be one of those people who is just literally going through the motions of life with nothing to look forward to. And so I think we all have to be owners of our life the way that we're moving forward. And I think that quiet quitting your job is almost kind of quiet quitting on yourself as well. So I think that a person has to tread a little bit carefully on that and be careful about how they're doing that and what their plan is to move out of it.
So Tara, something that we talk about a lot through our channel, through our different mediums of communication, our blog, etc., is freelancing. What does freelancing mean?
So freelancing is taking skills that you already have, maybe skills that you have gotten from a prior job, coursework, whether in college or high school, innate talent, skills, passions, whatever those are, taking those and monetizing those skills. Basically, solving a problem for somebody else. That's really what it ultimately is. When you can come in and you can solve a problem for somebody, namely a small business. We prefer to work with small businesses, right? Because those are the people who aren't necessarily in a position to hire an employee or have that ability to provide that much work for a 20, 30, 40 hour a week employee. You're solving a problem for them that can't be solved otherwise. And that is something that, of course, is growing more and more and more because people are realizing it's so much more beneficial and cost efficient to work with somebody that specializes in a certain thing. You come in and do that one thing instead of trying to find somebody that can fulfill 20 different tasks. It's easier to just try to find the people that specialize in those particular things. So we're seeing that to be a growing industry where people can tap into that.
Are freelancers self-employed?
Freelancers are self-employed, which come with a lot of perks like tax deductions and all sorts of fun stuff. In fact, we just did a training on this with people in our world where basically we were talking about how employees, obviously they have their gross income and then they get all of their taxes taken out and then they have to cover all of their expenses with what's left over. With being a freelancer or a business owner, you actually get to take all of your expenses, take them off the top, and then your profit is what's left over, and that's what you get taxed on. We see people talk about like 1099 contracting as the same as like an employee or a job. where we know that those are two completely different things. Like when you're freelancing, you aren't applying for jobs, right? Like you are fulfilling contracts and things like that. So you're definitely self-employed as a freelancer. You're not an employee, but sometimes I see people interchangeably use those terms, and the person has to be careful how they get caught up in that terminology.
Is it possible to work from home with a baby or kids?
Oh, of course. I wouldn't. So we see a lot of people comment on that working from home isn't a substitute for daycare. Now, that might be the case for some employers where, because again, they want to micromanage you and they want to make sure that they're getting every penny of the time that they're paying for. But as a freelancer or business owner, you absolutely can work alongside your kids. And in fact, I think it's a really great skill to let your kids see you performing and doing. So as far as a baby goes, like, yeah, I mean, I used to baby wear, and so they would be right on my lap while I was working, or, obviously when I'm doing my own thing, like I can stand up and work. You can take breaks, you can do whatever you want as long as you're working on your own and you don't have anybody else dictating your schedule or what that looks like. So oftentimes I would be working during nap time, bedtime. When my husband would be home, I'd take off into the office, whatever. One thing that bothers me the most is I see when somebody says, "Hey, I'm like trying to find an opportunity where I can work from home with my kids," and people immediately jump to that, like, "Oh, working from home isn't a substitute," but it is if you look for the right thing, right? Which, of course, you and I push freelancing and business ownership, but there are some employers out there who will accommodate that, especially if they're family-oriented businesses. So it just irks me. That this is one of the biggest pet peeves that I have is where people are just jump right to that. As if you somehow, for the people that are dedicated, somehow can't figure it out. I mean, I could go on and on and on and on about that subject, but I won't. But that is definitely something that I'm super passionate about because I've worked at home alongside my 8 kids. If I can do that, anybody can do it.
I would say it's probably a lot easier to work around your kids from home. If you are a freelancer, if that's the type of work that you have, if that's the kind of working from home that you're doing, I think that's a lot easier to do than it is if you have a job where you are tethered to their timetable. If your work from home job, it requires you to have your camera on for the whole day, for instance, to be logging in and out whenever you're working or not working, like that could get really burdensome and cumbersome, I think.
Be really annoying
to have to track your time that way. And so I think that the way that we do it is a lot easier, a job by design, a work by design around your life instead of arranging your life around your work. And I think that has actually appealed to a lot of people in our world because it's true, because it's empowering, because you feel like a whole person, not just a number that is going to be replaced as soon as you can't do your job anymore. If you get injured, you can't do your job, you can be replaced. If you have a baby, you can't do your job, you can be replaced. If you die, like we all will, you can't do your job anymore, you're going to be easily replaced. And I like the idea of doing something that is different and that I can do when I need or want to, that I enjoy, and that I'm not just a bunch of randomly thrown together responsibilities that don't really match like jobs tend to be.
So one of the things that I think is a disservice to parents, of course, is when you're going to work and you're miserable in your job and you're not appreciated and you're unhappy, and then you come home and you're dealing with your kids. And when I was in my 9 to 5, I felt like I got the worst of my kids because it was always, they were at daycare all day, they were tired. I was at work all day, I was tired. And then you never got to fully enjoy your kids, which is the whole reason that you had them to begin with. And so that's really one of the things that bothers me about that whole narrative. And then I see people say, "Oh, well, it's not fair to your job if you have your kids at home with you, and it's not fair to your kids if you're concentrating on your work all the time. And I thought, that it's so ridiculous, that argument. And I have said over and over and over again, like, and I'm going to say it again here for the people that are listening, I don't care where you work, you are not giving 100% of your 100% to your job all the time anyway, because again, you have coworkers interrupting you, you have boss interrupting you, you have meetings that could have been emails. Like, you have all of these things that are going into your job that people don't take into consideration. Well, if you can have coworkers interrupting you constantly and talking about the weekend that they had and all of the irrelevant information that you don't need to know, then your kids can be interrupting you while you're at home, while you're getting them a snack or whatever the case may be. And then the same goes if your kids were going to school or your kids are going to daycare, they're not getting 100% of their provider's time or their teacher's time, because they are 100%, part of 30 students that are in the room or 10 kids that are in the room or whatever environment that they're in. They're not the only one getting 100% of that attention, because all these other kids need attention too. And while you can sit there and say, oh, well, then they at least get to play with other kids. Well, not all kids want to play with other kids. Like, some kids have anxiety. Some kids have reasons that they don't want to be in an environment outside of their home. And kids are safe at home. That's the way it has been for centuries. Like, it's only been in the last several decades where daycare and school became a thing. And so to sit there and say that your kids must be socialized and your kids must be away from their parents for 9 hours a day is an absolute ridiculous argument. Anybody that wants to talk to me about that, this, Nicole, I will argue them under the bus. I will die on this hill over this argument.